Good evening, and welcome to the Navy Supply Corps Foundation's first Navy transition webinar. My name is Captain Retired Dan Pionk, and I'm the Executive Director of the Navy Supply Corps Foundation, and I'll be your host for tonight's webinar. I'd like to extend a special welcome to our flag officers and distinguished alumni. I hope everyone is staying healthy and safe. We're very excited to have almost 200 attendees for tonight's webinar. You all are in for a very special session with our distinguished panel tonight. But first, a few quick housekeeping comments. First, there'll be no chat function. Second, everyone in the audience remain muted for the duration of the webinar. And third, we have several questions that have already come in, and you'll also be able to submit them during the webinar using the Q&A button normally at the bottom of your screen. Next slide, please. Before we begin the webinar, let me briefly introduce the foundation for those of you who are not familiar with it. For over 50 years, the Navy Supply Corps Foundation has been in existence since 1970. Who is a member? Every Supply Corps officer who has worn the oak leaf becomes a member upon graduation from the Navy Supply Corps School and remains one for life. You do need to be registered, though, to receive our newsletter and announcements. If you're not already registered, I encourage you to go to our website and sign up. And also be sure to follow us on LinkedIn and other social media platforms. Next slide, please. The Foundation's mission is to provide programs and services to support the Navy Supply Corps community and promote its heritage and traditions. Our programs include scholarship, heritage, recognition, and transition, which is the focus of tonight's webinar. Details and information on these programs can be found on our website at www.usnfcf.com. If you like what the Foundation is doing and enjoy tonight's webinar, please help support our mission and programs by making a donation on our website. Next slide, please. Tonight's webinar will focus on two major segments. The first will be a mentoring segment, and the second will be a career spotlight segment. The mentoring segment will highlight the Foundation's partnership with the American Corporate Partners, or ACP, mentoring program. In addition, this segment will also include remarks from a current ACP mentor, as well as a Foundation board member who will share his experiences on mentoring. The second segment on Career Spotlight will feature a panel of 3 retired senior Supply Corps officers who discuss their military to civilian transition experience, as well as some potential career opportunities that you might want to consider as you make plans on transitioning from the military to the civilian sector. Now, it's my special privilege to introduce the Foundation's Transition Committee Chairman, Captain Retired Bob Dolan, who will be the moderator for tonight's webinar and with our panelists. So Bob, over to you.
Thank you, Dan, and welcome everybody to our first transition webinar. Transitioning to civilian life is a challenging process and shouldn't be a journey you need to take alone. One of the key recommendations that came out of the 2021 transition survey that was sent out to our Foundation members was to develop opportunities to provide mentoring services to transitioning supply personnel. Based on our review, American Corporate Partners have made the best use of Foundation resources and also capitalizes on existing capabilities. This evening, in our first segment, we'll be hearing about ACP's capability and from one of our own fellow supply officers that has been a ACP mentor for many years. First up is Mr. Richard Kometz. Mr. Kometz joined ACP as a Senior Vice President in November of 2021. He is a senior leader overseeing corporate relations, outreach, and communications of the team who assists veterans transitioning service members and their spouses to prepare for a meaningful career after military service. Prior to ACP and after retiring from the Army, Richard was the Director of Operations at Long Island University. Richard, could you tell us a little bit about ACP and how our listeners can be part of the program as either a mentor or a protege?
Sure, it'd be my pleasure. Can we go to the next slide? And the next slide. So American Corporate Partners, as was mentioned, is a national nonprofit, and we assist post 9/11 veterans with their transition. So the good thing that we do is help with mentoring. So it's one-on-one customized mentorship where we pair up our proteges, which are our veterans or even active duty spouses, with a mentor from corporate America or small businesses or the area that they're looking to get into. And that mentor then helps them through their transition, doing things like career counseling, professional networking, resume building, things of that nature. And to this point, we've been in existence since 2008. And since then, we've helped over 26,000 veterans. And you can see that we have a pretty high satisfaction rating as well. Next slide, please. So just to kind of give you an idea of the corporate partners, we have over 115 at this point. And I think we've added some since this slide was made. But we definitely have, the big thing I want to point out is we have representatives from just about every industry. And from these companies, we have members at every levels, from CEOs of some companies down to, line supervisors. So it's a great pool of talent that is really willing to give their time up to help a veteran in transition. Next slide, please. And here's a list of some of the areas that we specialize in, but really we have mentors just about in every area, which is really nice. I mean, if you're looking to go into real estate, we have real estate agents that can help. You want to be in IT, we have people from IBM, so we have a lot of great resources, and to include a lot of the members from the foundation as well. So we appreciate that. Next slide. And so the eligibility requirements, I mentioned a little bit earlier, but it's post 9/11. So as long as someone has served 180 days or more since 9/11, they're eligible. We help active duty spouses and then spouses of wounded members. Next slide. And so here's our demographics. It's pretty similar to the military. As you can see, as far as we have about 75% enlisted, 25% officers. We have different age groups, kind of two big humps. The lower 26% is, below 30, and then the 42% is above 40. So that means that we have those people that, just do a 4-year enlistment or something, and then we have people that stay 20 plus years. So again, having that wide variety of mentors is really important to be able to, meet the needs of all the different clientele there. And you can see even education is spread out. We have about a third with a graduate degree, a third with a bachelor's, and then a third that don't have a 4-year degree. And those can be challenging when trying to enter the corporate workforce. And the mentors are really good at helping them capitalize on the skills that they did learn and make it so that they don't have to go and take an entry-level job in most cases. Next slide, please. And, here's just some statistics that bring it all together for you. Really, there is a lot of difficulty in transition. I myself transitioned after 23 years from the Army, and I identify with all of these, and I would imagine I'm probably not alone in that. Deciding what career to even do is something that is not easy to figure out, especially if you don't want to do exactly what you were doing in the military. And then when you do try to apply for jobs, you don't get any feedback to know whether it was your resume, your experience. And so the other thing is your network is just not a corporate America network. It's usually a military network. So you don't have that help to have someone introduce you or get you into a company. And, again, translating military skills is really hard because you might have done something like been an infantryman or something, and people might think, well, how does that apply to being an IT or a project manager? And it's really hard to get that point across, but it is in fact true that there's a lot of skills that we've learned in the military that can transition that you may not at first think about. What we hope to do is reduce the length of unemployment. Really, we hope that people get mentors before they even get out of the military to help them with their transition. But it is unfortunate, but there are several people that do spend some time unemployed. If you look on the right too, the other thing that's a little bit disappointing is almost half, or 44% of people don't even stay in their job the first 6 months or first year. which means that they're having to transition again. Part of that's because a lot of people jump on the first job they find, and other is just that they're not sure what they're looking for, and they take a job and they realize it's not what they're what they need to make their life fulfilled. Next slide, please. So I mentioned we the number of people we've helped in the last year. We had about 3,500 complete the program, and about 2/3 of them found meaningful employment. We normally have a higher average starting salary rate, and again, the circles down the bottom are the ones that kind of translate from the last one I was discussing on the previous slide. But if you notice on the right, with ACP proteges, their job retention is 86%. So we attribute that to the mentors helping them find the right job at the right level in the right industry, and they're happy, so they stay longer. Next slide. And then these are the things when we surveyed our proteges, asked them what they worked on during their mentorship that most people said. And you can see things like improving your resume and interview skills, translating your military experience, helping network. All these things are super important. Searching for job opportunities. And the great thing is that you can kind of tailor your mentorship to what your needs are. So if it's not all of these things or one of these things, you can work it out with your mentor what you need to work on and how to best achieve those goals. Next slide. So what will happen if you do sign up? And I encourage anyone to sign up both as a protege or a mentor, depending on where you're at in your life. Well, if you apply, what will happen is one of our people will give you an email and ask you to decide some time to talk. And then they will, within one business day, contact you. And then once you decide on that time to talk, they'll have like a 15-20-minute conversation to really understand if you're a protege, what your goals are, what industry you think you might be going into, or any other desires you might have in a mentor. If you're a mentor, then we figure out what you are good at mentoring or what you can mentor about, finding out about your career and things of that nature. And then once we get that information, we try to find a mentor for that protege that meets all of their desires. And if once we find one, then we basically try to introduce each other to see if you think you can work together. And if that's the case, then we introduce you to each other and say, go ahead. And then throughout that process, we check in on you, find out what you're working on, give you resources, and help you throughout the process. Next slide. And we also hold weekly webinars and other special events. And you can see, basically, we do a lot of kind of transition topics. A lot of these are careers at type of presentations where we have hiring managers from like Lockheed Martin that are talking about what jobs they have available and how you can get yourself in a better position to get one of those jobs. And you can see all the other ones. But we also do straight up professional development. As a matter of fact, tomorrow around 1 o'clock, we're doing Major League Baseball. So they're talking about careers at Major League Baseball. And then the following week, there's I guess it's the week after Thanksgiving, we're doing a webinar about with Visa employees about career transition tips and tricks for resume improvement, things of that nature. Next slide. So if you are a protege or someone that is transitioning or wants to transition and you would like to sign up, you can scan that QR code now. We have a separate one for veterans and spouses. If you are someone that thinks they could be a mentor and contribute in that way, you can go to our website, acp-usa.org, and both applications are there. You can just click on the one that applies to you if you want to be a mentor or a protege. And then there's a short questionnaire. And then, as I mentioned, you'll be contacted within probably 24 to 48 hours. So I've just have to tell you that the amount of lives that I think have changed due to their mentor is amazing. And that's why I love my job, honestly, is because I get to hear these good news stories every day. And I think we're going to hear a little bit about one of our mentors from the foundation. And I think you'll hear it's really a good process to get involved in, both as a protege or a mentor. So with that, I will pass it off. Thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today.
Okay, well, thank you, Richard. I actually do have one question. And it's something I've been asked a couple of different times is, what time frame should transitioning military members be part of your mentoring program? When is it? Is it a year, 2 years out, a year and a half out?
Yeah,
When they plan on?
I would say between a year and 8 months, or a year to 6 months or so, like that. Because really, the ideal situation is if you get into it too early, like 2 years out or even a year and a half out, then you can't really act on what you're doing. So probably between a year and 6 months before you're getting out, because really what the mentor can help you do is, get yourself organized, your resume, practice for interviews, and then help you identify jobs to apply for, and tailor your resume, and then help you hopefully with some interview tips if you get an interview, and then even afterwards negotiating salaries and other benefits that you might not have experience doing, and then finally just once you get into that new job, figuring out how to integrate yourself into that new position and new life. So really, that's the best time frame. Between a year or 6 months before you get out, I think is probably the best.
Okay, that's great. One of the things that really intrigued me about ACP was that you provide these mentor capabilities to spouses of active duty personnel. Do you get a lot of spouses that take advantage of these services?
We do. We have about right now. It's probably close to about 20% of our people, but really it's just growing a lot now. And I think the good thing is that there's a lot more remote work opportunities, so that's been helpful as well. So a lot of spouses are really able to get back into the workforce and move along with their spouse, with some of these companies that really recognize the huge talent pool that the spouses are, and are allowed to work from home and remotely. And that has been, I think, a big help. So I think now is the best time for spouses to get out there and get involved.
Okay. Any other last words before we
It looked like there
transition?
was a question that asked if you can do it more than once. I mean, oftentimes we try to limit it to one person, one time, because we really are competing with the number of mentors and proteges. But if you have a compelling reason, like you completely change what you were doing or whatever, it doesn't hurt to ask. But so that would be my 2 cents on that. But yeah, I really think it's a game changer when you're transitioning to have someone in your corner helping you out, networking, and giving you advice.
Oh, absolutely. It's something you shouldn't really have to do by yourself.
I agree.
Okay. We're going to go ahead and transition. Next, we'll hear from retired Captain Eddie Fishburne. Mr. Fishburne served over 27 years as an active duty Supply Corps officer. His last duty station was as a Force Supply Officer, Comnav Surfland. Upon retirement from the Navy, he was a regional vice president for Circuit City Stores. Currently, he serves as the director of pro-business for the 500 stores of the Western Division of the Home Depot. In his role at Home Depot, he has volunteered for over 10 years as a ACP mentor. Eddie, if you can just tell us how you got involved as a mentor in the ACP program, and how your experience has been over the last few years.
Yeah, well, first of all, I want to apologize for how I sound. I sound worse than I feel. I've come down with a little bit of bug in the last couple of days, but I feel fine. So I assure you, I'll get through this. I actually stumbled upon it. They advertised it on our internal website, ACP, and I said, I wonder what that is. And I signed up for it. Interestingly, the very first, I filled out the little form, said what my background was. And the first person that was assigned to me as a protege happened to be a transitioning Navy Supply Corps officer who was getting out from naval reactors. And I thought it was great, and I really enjoyed the experience. I've had, looking at the statistics that we saw on those other slides, I've run the gamut. I've had officers, I've had enlisted, I've had people who are still on active duty, and I've had people that have been out for a while that have signed up for the program. I have thoroughly enjoyed it. The reason I think I considered myself a mentor throughout my career. in a couple specific roles in particular. When I was XO of Supply Corps School, I felt that was a great role to be a mentor, and then in the Surfland role as well. So I got involved literally by just stumbling upon it. And then when I joined the board, the foundation board, we started talking about it. And I like to think that my positive experience was one of the things that got the board interested in pursuing this. So it's been a great experience for me. And if I could, I'd like to go to the next slide, please. I have a couple pointers I'd like to give. I think these are a few things I thought about that apply both to proteges as well as mentors. And the biggest one to me is listening. I think that the mentor has to listen, but the protege has to listen. And you will both learn from one another. The conversations, the communication is the key to everything in getting a job. And I will tell you, I've been through this. I did it myself. I transitioned out of the Navy, and I moved from Circuit City to Home Depot all through my own networking. And I have 3 sons who were naval officers, so I've been through it with them. All 3 of them got out after their initial commitment, so I've been through it with them. So I do have some experience with this. I would tell you that as you engage with a mentor, I find it very important to get to know each other on a personal basis before you get into the professional aspects of it. I think you will learn what drove your mentor in their career, and you will learn from each other. But personal comes before professional. Find out where your mentor stands with family and stage of life. The mentor should find out where the protege stands in the stage of life. There's a great difference if you have young children or whether your children are already out of college as to what you may want to do in terms of mobility after you get out of the military. It was told to me by a person who I did not even realize I was mentoring, who happens to be a former Supply Corps admiral. He told me the best mentoring I ever had was when I didn't know I was being mentored by you. And I never realized that he felt that way. But I will tell you, the relationships can be very formal or informal. I find the ACP relationship to be very casual, but it has some structure. I also have numerous mentoring relationships that are very informal with lots of people. I have what I consider as a very strong network. A lot of people contact me through LinkedIn. I never turn down a Naval Supply Corps officer or any naval officer or anyone from the Navy who reaches out to me on LinkedIn. And also, I'm very much connected with my University Alumni Association. I went to the University of Notre Dame, and I get a lot of people through the Notre Dame MBA program reach out to me as well through LinkedIn when they see that. So building your network is absolutely critical. And I find one of the things that I do with my ACP proteges is introduce them to my network when I find that there is a need or they have a requirement to reach beyond what my skills may be. I always tell my mentees that my job is not to get them a job, but it's to guide their journey. They have to get the job. You sell yourself. But I will tell you, I like to help guide the proteges in this journey. And again, yeah, it's sort of an iterative process. I did not know what I wanted to do when I retired from the Navy. And I think a lot of you will have that same experience. I wouldn't be worried about that. You will figure out what you want to be when you grow up. And again, I never decided to make the Navy a career. Even I just kept getting jobs I liked. And, to this day, I still think I'm still growing up and I still may do other things beyond this. You never know, but I enjoy the mentoring aspect of what I do. Be genuine, be friendly, be open with your mentor. And I will tell you that ACP gives mentoring some structure. I need the structure. Otherwise I will just, I'll be all over the place, but the structure is there. They have all kinds of resources for both mentors and for proteges. I check in about monthly or a little less frequently with my contact at ACP. He will reach out to me. He or she will reach out to me and see how we're doing. Just to let you know, today I had a call with my current protege from ACP. He's a retiring Marine Corps Chief Warrant Officer. We had about an hour conversation. And out of that conversation today, I gave him 2 contacts of mine that I wanted him to reach out to. One happens to be a Home Depot person, and another one happens to be an advertising executive who's a friend of mine. So again, the conversations will drive your mentorship. And I would tell you, the experience I have had has been very rewarding. And when I can help somebody move on in their life, it just makes me feel great. And that's what I liked about the Navy. And that aspect of what I'm doing now, I enjoy thoroughly. And I would encourage you to participate in this. Bob, that's all I have. Hope that's useful.
Oh yeah, that's great. One question I have is, what qualities do you think a person needs in order to be a good mentor?
You have to be a good listener. You have to be friendly, and you have to be willing to help somebody. I think it also helps to have a network, to have a developed network, and not be afraid to share that with people.
All right. I don't think we have. Oh, I guess there is one Q&A here. Okay. I don't have any other. Oops, sorry. I don't have any other questions. I think both you and Richard gave us a good view into the mentoring experience in the world. And I personally think that's a great resource that people should be taking advantage of as if they're starting to think about transitioning off to a new career.
And I would encourage anybody, on the first slide, I had my email address, but look me up on LinkedIn. Please feel free to connect. I will definitely respond, and I will definitely connect with you. Thank you very much for your attention and for participating tonight.
That goes for me as well. This is Rich. If anybody wants to connect with me, for sure, I can see how I can help you. Thanks.
All right, Teresa, could you go on to the next slide? Thank you. So we're now going to shift our discussion to career paths that transitioning supply personnel might consider as they start to make a decision to leave the military service. We will hear from 3 former supply officers on their transition experience and how they landed their current career. We'll start off with retired Captain Scott Eberwein. Mr. Eberwein served 26 years on active duty, including sea tours on the ballistic missile submarine USS West Virginia and the gold guided missile cruiser, the USS Anzio. In 2013, he was deployed as part of Operation Iraqi Freedom, serving as Commander Task Force Unit 55.5.3, and was responsible for 4 commands and the backload redeployment of the U.S. Marine Expeditionary Force. Currently, Scott is the Senior Naval Service Instructor for the Naval Junior ROTC unit at Greenville High School in Ohio. Scott, could you speak to what led you to being part of the Navy Junior ROTC program and the path that took you there?
Absolutely, Bob. Hey, thank you, and good evening here to the Navy Supply Corps Foundation, and what a great opportunity it is through this career transition tool for everybody to be able to use. I was at Greenville from 2017 through the 2019 school years. I'm at Hamilton High School. I'm in the middle of my 3rd year now. So what led me to this? You've already got my bio, 26 years of experience. And I'm on the agenda slide right now, but my path at NJROTC, it started out as I actually could relate to many of you here tonight. At my 9-year point, I actually got out of the Navy. I separated as a junior officer, so I experienced transition at that point, and joined the reserves, and through that kind of got energized. There was a recall opportunity to go back to where I'd served my first short tour at Athens, Georgia, as a Supply Corps school instructor. I went back there on recall, ran into people and reservists like Dan Pionk, and it really energized me to work with some neat Americans and converted to full-time support / TAR. I understand that name's changed back to TAR, what it was way back 20 some years ago. But going through that and then transitioning later, 16 years later as a retiree, I've kind of seen it from both sides. And I'll just add to what the previous two speakers had mentioned about mentoring or about transitioning. There's three things that I've kind of seen. I would say, and what I advise people that reach out to me to give me my advice. But number one, make sure you're administratively, when you're still on active duty, make sure you're administratively got your record all updated. We do a great job as a Supply Corps community with the OP roadshows to update your records, but just make sure that everything is annotated there. Number two, very, very important that I've learned in my transitions, make sure your medical record is fully, is complete. And you do that by when there's an ailment, when you're on active duty or in the reserves, make sure you see somebody about that. Don't just tough it out. And then 20 years later, after you retired or something comes to bear, then it can be tough as you try to seek getting VA support if there's no record of it. So go to medical, get that all resolved long before you transition. And within the career world, a couple things that stick out, and Richard said this, is it's sometimes hard to figure out what you want to be. I would offer this: as soon as you kind of think through that path, and if there's any training that you can do, certifications or anything like that before you actually retire, and get that in place before you actually are retired, you can get ahead of the game a little bit there. Networking is key. My networking, it can be a lot of different ways. Through my Navy ROTC program at Miami University, I'm sorry, it wasn't Notre Dame, but went through Miami University. Through that network, it actually, that's how I got connected to a couple different jobs in the Cincinnati area where I retired from. So I'd like to, if we flip slides there, but how did I get connected to the NJROTC? I actually didn't know anything about it. I guess 20 some years ago, I'd heard about it for maybe 20 seconds and moved on. But when I retired out of NAV sub headquarters, there was about a year before I retired, there was a staff member that held their retirement ceremony at the Harrisburg High School, and the Navy JROTC program there hosted it. And then talking afterwards during the reception with the instructors, I learned something about it. We probably all know a little bit about the Sea Cadets, because they actually probably have a location there on the bases, but you don't see the JROTC programs much because they're out in the community. But what a neat way it is for those that really have always thought about wanting to teach at the high school level. You can leverage off your Navy experience and then come in and getting paid much higher than what a beginning instructor is. So a superb opportunity for those. But number one, though, it's not for everybody. I think Richard said that again. Maybe you don't choose the first thing. I do see some people getting out, and I'll advise them, why do you want to be a high school instructor? The easy button to say, I want to do that because I've never really interviewed for a job the last 20 some years. Well, that may not be the reason to go teach high school kids. But for me, I had the ability that when I transitioned off active duty, I moved back to where I'm from for various reasons. But I had the ability to substitute for a year to figure out if I even liked high school kids. And then there was a job that opened up at Greenville High School. After 2 years there, a sick parent required me to kind of back off. That was an hour-plus drive each way. But I was able to substitute again during that year as I was taking care of some of those requirements with my family. And then lo and behold, the job right by where I live opened up, and it's been a lot of fun. I get a lot of satisfaction from it, lots of activities I want to talk about, but the biggest satisfaction I get is watching my students graduate. Graduation night is awesome for me because some of these students, it wears me out to get them to that point and then to develop a plan to graduate, and then I encourage them all that they do the best of their abilities. So next slide, please. What is it though? It's a citizenship development program. Number one goal of the Navy JROTC program is to improve the graduation rate. All services have some sort of citizenship development program. If you're retired Navy, you can only fill the Navy positions. There's an officer position and then instructor position that can expand if you have a larger school or larger unit, then you can get more of the enlisted instructor positions. I'm not a recruiting service, but there are opportunities for those who do take this course 2+ years. That can change year to year. At least last year's, if you take at least 2 years, you can advance to E2 immediately upon graduation or upon boot camp graduation. Believe it or not, I do have Service Academy nomination ability. All units have Naval Academy nomination ability. I don't have an appointment ability. And if you're ranked in the top 20% of the units each year, then you also have West Point and the Air Force Academy nomination ability. And I have students from all the entire spectrum, from one end of just hoping to get them to graduation, graduate, and hopefully get some sort of a plan, to those that are very, very gifted. And I have some students that are at West Point right now and at the Naval Academy. So what does the Navy provide to the school districts? Well, back up here. I am actually an employee of the school district. I am not in the Navy. I'm not active duty at all. I'm not connected with that. But half of my paycheck does come from the Navy, who reimburses the school district, who I am an employee of. There is a contract between the Navy and the school district. My job as a senior naval instructor for the program is to make sure that the school district complies with that contract. Just had my annual inspection a week ago. My Navy boss came in to inspect us. We do a pass and review ceremony. Every year we do that. And how would you want to find out more? There's 2 ways you can do that. Is go visit a school district that's probably near you that has a program. Just drop in or call ahead and talk with the instructors about it. But I talk about that inspection every other year. So 1 year is my Navy boss comes in, my regional commander, what we call area commanders. But then there is the off year, I will go out and pick an inspector. So the two times I've done this, I actually reached out and got Supply Corps officers. I had them come in and do the inspection on me. And it's really just go through the pass and review. It's a neat ceremony. It's pretty neat to meet these kids, and every person that's done that's really been energized by seeing that. The Navy also provides student uniforms, curriculum, equipment. There is some federal funding that I have to manage. It's not much. I get reimbursed from several different pots of money, but they're in inventory accountability. As Supply Corps officers, it's not much. It's kind of like a very, very small minor property inventory. So that's pretty easy for this community. And uniform and grooming standards required. I do not do the PRT anymore, but I am required to meet the body fat height weight table charts. So next slide, please. So there's a kind of 2 parts to the whole program. There is in most school districts, it's considered an elective course. But when students come in, regardless of how old they are, what year they are, as far as your freshmen to seniors, you start out with a Naval Science 1 program that kind of whips them into shape. I have a retired gunnery sergeant that was a DI down at Parris Island, a perfect guy for that particular job. It varies year to year based on our enrollment numbers, but we trade back and forth who teaches the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th years. Now, after school and the extracurricular activities, there's one thing I've learned about high schools from when I was, in high school many years ago, is there's competitions for everything, and that's the same for NJROTC. There's drill team competitions, which is the big granddaddy of all competitions for the NJROTC world. 5 different routines that you can compete in. It's like the Marine Corps silent drill team. We've got a pretty good team here at the school I am, and we were national champions in the color guard competition and 3rd in the nation in all drill teams 2 years ago. And we're reload every year to compete at that, and that's pretty neat. We do have an air rifle program, academic teams, and orienteering. So the gunnery sergeant does the drill. I lead the air rifle, and academics, and orienteering. And just last year, we competed in nationals out in California with orienteering, which is running around the woods with a map and a compass. And we've become pretty good at that. And then I had the academic team compete. We were on the USS Midway museum ship in San Diego last April. for the Rainbow National. So some neat opportunities out there. A big part, though, of citizenship development is getting the kids involved in the community, and we do that pretty big time. Students do wear a uniform once a week, and instructors, there was a recent change to Navy JROTC standards for the instructors. I wear the uniform just once a week, and then the other days of the week, I'm either wearing PT gear, and when the students do that, or I'll wear polo shirts with Navy JROTC or the school unit type logo on it. I will admit, though, it was strange because it was about a year after I retired that I put a uniform back on. It was strange initially, but for my community, there's not much military around here. It's very, very positive military supporting community, but it really, I've come to embrace that I represent the military and enjoy it a lot and get a lot of satisfaction out of it. There's lots of things you can do in a program. I will say that you make it what you want to be. The guidelines are very minimal. There's some minimum stuff you got to cover, but really it's you make it what you want based upon the students that you have. And as you look around the nation, programs could vary from some schools, maybe it's that doesn't get a lot of respect in the school, to other schools. You may see the JROTC program as the prima donna program there. And I've seen all those types of programs out there. I get the whole spectrum of kids in my program, and I really do enjoy that, especially after leaving Greenville after 1 year. I really looked in the mirror, and I would be a liar to say I didn't have a tear in my eye thinking I'll never get a chance to do this again. And fortunately, it did happen. I really enjoy this and get a lot of satisfaction from it. Next slide, please. Here's a couple pictures, slides of pictures. You can see drill teams, different competitions. That middle slide shows a group of cadets that are finishing up an orienteering meet. You see my brain brawl team back during COVID that's sitting at the table and competing. That was pretty neat. Next slide. And then, yes, I have an air rifle range in my school. Most teachers don't even know that, but you have to go through a pretty extensive safety program. I lead that, and we just competed in the SecNav competition for JROTC students. Actually, just about an hour ago, I finished up. You see some pictures of me. I took some students to Norfolk back at the end of September. So I was introduced as pre-comming the USS Anzio 30 years ago. I took these students to go watch the decommissioning ceremony of that same ship. And one neat thing that we have too, I mentioned leadership camps. So part of that too is a sailing camp. And I took a picture there of me helping out teaching sailing in my regional camp for that. So there's some neat things you can do. It's really unlimited. I will mention this though, that if there's anybody out there as far as networking that's in the Norfolk area, I'm taking a charter bus full of students here on Thursday morning. We're headed to Norfolk and going to spend the weekend there. I do have a couple openings that just came up. I'm going on a destroyer, but I'm looking for some opportunities to tour some other ships, amphibs there at Norfolk or Little Creek, and then go visit some other commands. So reach out to me via LinkedIn if you can soonest. All right, and finally, last slide there. What can you do to learn more? Reach out, and you can go to that website. It falls under the NETC link there and NSTIC. It's kind of a clunky website, but work your way down, and there's a lot of different links you can drop into. The instructor link will show you the application process, which I highly recommend you do. And about a year out, maybe. It just depends on when you're retiring. But there's currently two boards a year, one in the fall and one in the spring. Make sure you meet those cutoff dates for the applications. But I'd say about a year out, because school districts tend to look for job fills, as soon as it opens, but usually in the winter time, springtime before the following school year. Instructor pay, the short of instructor pay, I actually get paid very well, but it's all based upon what your rank is when you're retired. You continue that rank, and then the time clock continues. So I'm now an 06 over 33 years. So I've maxed out all the 06 pay. And the allowances are based on the zip code of my school district. You subtract out what your retirement pay is that I get from DFAS, and that difference is considered to be minimum pay, the minimum instructor pay. There is some discussions about that pay calculation changing to more of kind of a GS type thing where each instructor would get a certain rate, and then the senior naval instructor, which would be the officer job, would get a little bit more just because of the additional duties on top of that. But either way, you're going to come in at a much higher rate than a typical teacher. I'm the highest paid teacher in my school district. My gunnery sergeant that's retired, he is at the top level as well. So you get paid well, but you really get some job satisfaction there. So I'll open it up for any questions that you have there, Bob, you may have received, but I really do. This is something neat to consider. It's a great way to transition to teaching if you're interested in that. So thank you.
Yeah, hey, Scott, thank you. This is the junior RTC program is a good program because I deal with the Air Force junior RTC program here in the town I live in, and it's a great way to get back not only to the community that you live in, but it's a great way to start molding the next generation of leaders. So next, we'll hear from retired Captain Carla Myers. Ms. Myers served 30 years as an active duty supply corps officer. Her last duty station was as a supply officer of the USS Macon Island. She was the first female department head ever to serve on board. Upon leaving active duty, Ms. Myers was a senior logistician within the Readiness Division branch head warfare integration at the Pentagon, responsible for the integration, coordination, and management of 9 primary naval warfare readiness portfolios. Currently, she leads the supply chain and logistics modernization and business development growth efforts for the Coast Guard, leveraging Navy's and other military services best practices for Deloitte. Carla, if you could tell our audiences about your transition process and how it got you to working for Deloitte.
Yes, I would certainly get into that, Bob, and thank you, everyone. Good evening. It's such a pleasure to be on this panel with my esteemed colleagues. Fast Eddie, you were N41 when I was a Radford Suppo, and Steve and I were instructors down in Athens way back when, so it's been quite the homecoming. This is a fascinating and very timely topic, that of transitioning from military to civilian life. Just, you know, a short 2.5 years ago, I transitioned from the Supply Corps after 30 years and landed at Deloitte at the height of the pandemic and with a bunch of other stuff going on in the background. I'll get into that with a little bit more detail later, but in the interest of time, and Bob, please sure keep me honest, I like to go to the next slide and tee things up. First and foremost, congratulations on your transition and thank you for your service. Transition from the military to civilian life is a major milestone in and of itself, and I strongly recommend to treat it with as much care and attention as you might give a brand new puppy. We've already covered some of the administrative aspects of your transition. You've been to transition courses right now, so I'd like to camp out on the next slide just a little bit and then tell you about myself before we wrap up. So you might have seen other variations of this Venn diagram, but I'd like to unpack this beginning in the upper left-hand corner. Oh, we're on the wrong slide. We could go to slide 3, please. There we are, thank you. So the beauty of transitioning to the civilian sector is that you get to choose what you do in this next chapter. But as many of my other colleagues have mentioned, you may not know what you'd like to do. I certainly did not initially, nor how to get there. Now, some of you may already have all that figured out, you know, but for those of us who had a lot going on, when we were transitioning, you may feel a little unsettled, even anxious about what the next chapter is going to look like. It takes time, you know, got to communicate with the family, networking, introspection, and by all means, give yourself a lot of grace to get things moving in the right direction. What season of life are you in? Have you recently undergone a life transition? Marriage, children, grandchildren, divorce, caregiving. Let's just have real talk here. Loss of a loved one, menopause, full-blown hot flashes and mood swings. I know, there may be someone out there that knows what I'm talking about, but these are things that can add a little element of excitement to your life. What needs to be reconsidered at this point? The question I mentioned is that it's not really about if these things are going to occur, but when. We're either coming out of something, getting ready to go into something, or already in the thick of something. Spouses, partners, pets are even transitioning with you. So it may be worthwhile to have, to discuss what the overarching goal is. Maybe you may want to pursue a hobby full-time, completely pivot from the conventional. One of the things that I had to ask myself was, what is the culture and climate like where I would want to be? Does it align with my values? You may want to have the flexibility to work from anywhere. And let's take a look at that economics and extracurricular activities segment for a moment. Can you afford to stay where you are, or should you move to another location? Sure, the Navy's going to, offset some of that dynamic there, but, we've been getting some tax-free pay benefits, for the longest time. Are you prepared for the next tax bracket? That changes when you transition out, and that was something that that may be a shocker. I know it was to me. Or you may be in a position where you have significant savings and you can take significant time off. Just something to consider. But I would offer that rest is good for the soul, mind, and body. And I mention that because those are areas that we just don't talk about. And rest is very important. I could care less how long you've spent in the Navy, whether it was 3 months, 3 years, or 30. You may need a break. So taking that vacation and chilling out, hey, take the time to reflect on your service time. Just breathe and get reacquainted with your family and your own surroundings. One of the questions that I get frequently asked when I facilitate transition seminars in Deloitte is around worth and value. And I offer that, one's worth and value is not determined necessarily by one's title, position, compensation package, or quite frankly, someone else's opinion. Inclusive leaders will recognize and appreciate what a talented employee brings to the table, and particularly, us military. So know your own worth from a position of experience with confidence. You own it. It's quite common to experience a temporary loss of identity when we transition. Who are we? Who am I without that uniform? After I lost loved ones, it's like, okay, my parents are no longer here. Who am I? It's important to reflect on what brings you joy and focus on your self-care. That's why I have that, wellness right there in the middle of things. What does thriving in this next chapter look like for you? Regardless if you go back to school or pivot in a completely different direction post-military, your well-being, and I foot stomp this, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, is at the very epicenter of this transition intersection. Seek counseling if you need it and when you need it. There's no shame in the game. I know when I lost several family members of mine, a grief counselor was pivotal for my healing journey. And I'm so glad that I took that time, that I gave myself permission to use the resources that were available to me. And again, to heal from what life brings you sometimes. Nurture, safeguard, and continue to grow in these areas. And you'll find that regardless of season, you'll be able to endure and become more resilient as life continues to keep you on your toes. Where and how you spend your time during this transition phase matters, so make it count. And as we migrate to the next slide, you know, I can share that my transition to civilian life after 30 years of service had many peaks and valleys. So just to give you a quick scenario, the week of my retirement ceremony in March of 2020, I buried my 61-year-old brother, Charlie, who encouraged me to join the Navy. That very same week, my 87-year-old father underwent spinal cord surgery the day after I retired. The following week, COVID hits, and then I became my dad's nurse and physical therapist. You talk about the perfect storm, a lot going on. But through it all, and as my colleagues mentioned, you know, the network works. And my network was activated on my behalf for post-Navy opportunities. As a matter of fact, a former coworker of mine, as I was, you know, managing by walking around, I was making the rounds one particular morning. He just reached out and said, "Carla, do you have a job yet?" And quite frankly, with everything that was going on personally, I had not given a lot of attention to what I was going to do next. So my coworker put me in touch with a friend of his to obtain some transition counseling over a cup of hot tea, and the rest pretty much is history. One conversation led to another conversation, which led to an offer at Deloitte, and I'm forever grateful for that. I onboarded Deloitte 1 week after I was off the Navy's rolls in June of 2020. And I share that not even one full year on the job, my father was diagnosed with cancer in January of 21. I became his caregiver while he was in hospice care at his house in Florida. I'm sharing all of this, okay, because life is still going to go on. And throughout your transition, while everybody's journey may be different, you're going to go through some stuff. Not every path is going to be straight. Some paths may be filled with peaks and valleys, as mine definitely was, but it is certainly worthwhile. Blessed to work at a firm that believes in wellness, that believes and encourages for folks to take time off with a leave of absence if that is so required. I was able to do that when both of my worlds collided, and I'm still here. And I just offer that whatever it is that you need to do, seek the assistance. Don't be afraid to ask for help, because there are many folks out there that are going through, you know, similar journeys, have gone through and made the leap, you know, took a leap of faith and have landed very successfully. So I'm very grateful for my faith and the healing journey that the grief counselor and also Grief Share was able to put me on. And I know we're out of time, but likewise, please connect with me on LinkedIn, send me an email. Thank you for your patient attention, and I wish you every success on your journey. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, go Navy, beat Army.
Yeah, thank you, Carla, for all of that. I did have one question, but I'm going to kind of leave it to the end here. Our last panelist is retired Commander Joe Purcell. Mr. Purcell served 10 years as a supply officer. He served in a variety of assignments, including aboard a nuclear submarine aircraft carrier as a major weapons system contracting officer in Washington, D.C., and as a special advisor for logistics to the Pakistani Navy in Karachi. Currently, he is a vice president of financial sponsors group at Morgan Stanley, and leads a group of investment bankers focused on providing acquisition financing mergers and acquisition advice, and equity capital market execution to leading private equity firms. Joe also is a co-chair of Morgan Stanley's Veterans Network, which is one of his 7 sponsored diversity groups. Joe, if you can talk about the steps you took as you were transitioning out of the military and how it led you into the world of finance.
That'd be great, Bob. And thank you very much. And thank you to you and Dan for organizing this. And I got to say, Carla, that was incredibly inspirational and helpful, because a lot of the things that people said, and you as well, Scott, a lot of the advice that you gave, and then Richard before from ACP, are all painting a picture of how you kind of navigate this transition. I'll give you my own particular one, but I just, my kudos to my fellow panelists for that. I also need to mention up front that Morgan Stanley was one of the founding members of American Corporate Partners, which is great. It's grown dramatically. It was before my time at Morgan Stanley. I can't take any credit for that at all, but it has been a heck of an organization. And I think for people thinking of transitioning, these kinds of organizations did not exist when I first got out of the military. And so I would certainly reach out to them, because whether you want to go into finance, which I'll talk about in a second, or these other lines, to try to figure out who you are, what you want to do, what really turns you on. An organization like ACP is just terrific for that. And again, I think this is an amazing idea to do this. I mean, they'll start out saying, I had no clue. I mean, I had no clue what I wanted to do. As Bob pointed out, when I was a Holy Cross ROTC kid, I spent almost 10 years in. So when I got out of supply corps school on submarines, ballistic missile, I did that for 3 years. Then 2 years, as Bob mentioned, as weapons systems contracting intern or officer, used to be called Naval Acquisition Contracting Officer. I worked at Naval Air Systems Command in Crystal City, buying the Harrier jets for the Marines. And what piqued my interest in finance and banking was working with a senior program manager on that Harrier jet program. It was a big transaction for me at the time. It was like a $500 million deal. I'd never heard of numbers like that, to buy these jets. And we were doing spreadsheets and due diligence and all this stuff that I didn't do as a submarine officer. And I'm like, this is pretty cool. This is like deal oriented. Is there something like this on the outside that people do outside of the Navy? So I was just reading and thinking, and I'd heard about Wall Street. I was just flipping magazines. Nobody in my family had ever worked on Wall Street, so I didn't think about it. So I started thinking about, well, how do I get to Wall Street? Because I like finance and whatnot. And I heard you got to go to a business school. You have to go to certain business schools, right? So my next duty, I didn't quite figure out how to do that yet. My next duty station was Theodore Roosevelt. I was the stock control officer there. And my first attempt at business school, I applied to Harvard, and I was resoundingly rejected the first time around. I didn't have any guidance on it, so I just kind of hand wrote an application, which sounds ridiculous now in hindsight, but surprisingly, I didn't get in. But I kept at it, and I kept thinking about it, and I applied a second time. Once again, did not get in. So then I was assigned to Naval Postgraduate School as a student, and I went there and I applied a third time. And the third time was the charm for me. I got on the third time to business school. And, I'm going to tell you about what I do for a living, but I think what really piqued my interest was the finance, was the community, was the deal community, was contracting, kind of led me to think about that. I would tell you that Wall Street is a very, very big place. What I do specifically, I work in investment banking. I started after business school, my first 15 years at JP Morgan. I started out as an associate post MBA and, made vice president. Then I made managing director there at JP Morgan. I got to work with Jamie Dimon, all that amazing firm, right? But what I do specifically at JP Morgan, and I continue to do at Morgan Stanley, is I cover private equity firms for a living. Okay, so you may have heard firms like Blackstone or Carlyle or Apollo. If you read, the Journal or some of the big newspapers, these guys do buyouts for a living. Okay, so acquisition financing, they own their companies for a while, then they sell them through an M&A or an IPO, or they recapitalize their companies through debt. That's what I do for a living. So again, 15 years at JP Morgan. I then transitioned over to Morgan Stanley about a dozen years ago. And I now lead an effort, as Bob was alluding to, covering what we call middle market sponsors or middle market private equity firms. And these guys all have between $2 and $10 billion of current fund size. All right. So there's about 400 private equity firms in North America, and fortunate to work at Morgan Stanley. It's one of the top 2 or 3 firms size-wise. It's a very fast-paced environment. Investment banking is a little kinder and gentler than it was at the Barbarians of the Gate time, the books we all read in the 70s and 80s and 90s. But it's still global capital markets. We are at a global firm at Morgan Stanley, and so we work around the clock. I don't so much, as I have a lot of junior partners that do that more so than I do, but I used to all the time. And you know, the nice thing about it is you come into work every day and you're stimulated by all kinds of twists and turns of the same corporate finance question. Now, an IPO for a tech company is very different from an IPO for a consumer company, for instance, right? And there's a lot of vagaries or particularities around an M&A deal for any corporation or any private equity company. We do derivatives to hedge people against interest rate or foreign exchange changes. And that's all part of what we do for a living at Morgan Stanley in investment banking. I want to make some other broader points as well, because I could talk about investment banking for hours, obviously. We could all talk about our careers for hours, but a couple things. Firstly, more broadly, financial services. So Morgan Stanley, for instance, about half of our business is what we call institutional securities. Okay, you'll hear that term if you're interested in either investment banking or sales and trading. So what is institutional securities? Is all of investment banking and all of sales and trading. So when you see these huge trading floors, we have people, we have a lot of electronic platforms that trade stocks and bonds all day long, right? There's trillions of dollars that flow through the markets on a daily basis, okay? So that's one side of the business. The other side of the business at Morgan Stanley is wealth management. Okay, so we have 17,000 financial advisors. We're the largest wealth management firm in the world. Merrill Lynch is number 2 to us by just a little bit. So we're managing money for individuals. It's also a phenomenal career opportunity if people are interested in that, because there's a stickiness, if you will, to wealth management, which there isn't to investment banking. That is, when you have a client, an individual client in wealth management, that client will probably be with you for a very, very long time through their, you know, as they're getting married and they have children and they retire. So usually that's a terrific business. And there's the big wealth transfer going on in this country from the baby boomers, we to the millennials and the Gen Z, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's a very, it's a growth business. It's a business I'd suggest to people if they're interested in the financial services aspect of the big banks. That's the other big one. Now, we also have operations and technology people. All that kind of stuff is backbone of the firm. But I'm here to talk to you more about what I know, which is the finance part of it. I also want to mention it's important that, as Bob said, I'm also the co-chair of the Veterans Network at Morgan Stanley. I think this is important because it touches on ACP and what we're all trying to do to help each other out here, right? So I've been a co-chair there of the Vets Network for about 7 years now. Again, we have 1,000 either veterans or allies at Morgan Stanley. It is a very robust group of people. We have a group of about 20 or 30 working group members that help the co-chair and I run it. And what do we do is we recruit, we mentor, and we give back. Okay. Now we may mentor in association with American corporate partners or a lot of organizations on Wall Street that I won't get into because the list is too long. But our veterans very much care. I mean, I can throw a baseball and hit I wouldn't hit them, but 7 or 8 veterans right on my floor, right? Marines, Navy, Army, and everybody's trying to figure out the same thing. How do I get here? And then how do I navigate my career? So we veterans, we're not biased by what service people come from. We're not biased with their supply corps officer or surface warfare or whatever. We're just all trying to help each other out. I had the nice occasion last week with Richard, who was speaking at the top of American Corporate Partners, to host the Secretary of the Navy last week at the New York Stock Exchange. SecNav rang the bell on Thursday, which was the Marine Corps birthday, as we all know. And then Friday was Veterans Day, right? So he came. The reason I bring that up is Rich was there from American Corporate Partners. Then we had Morgan Stanley. We have a very active dialogue with all the other major firms, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, where I came from, Bank of America. So we had 20 Wall Street firms there representing 30 different people, including 30 different people from 20 firms, including not just the big brokerage firms, but veteran-owned brokerage firms, really small ones, which we do business with, et cetera, law firms, all kinds of firms, nonprofits like ACP. So we on Wall Street, as much as we compete for deals in business, when it comes to veterans, we're trying to help other people out because I said at the top, I was clueless. We didn't have these programs like we have now. So that's my history. It's what I do now. Just a couple quick points and then I'll wrap. Lifestyle considerations. So what I chose to do, there's a sacrifice to that. That Wall Street career for JO coming out, it's a lot of hours. So if you have a kid, and I did, you're not home much, okay? Because it's just the rhythm of the business. It's what you're signing up for, right? It's not like they're being mean. It's just the way they're staffed. It's a resourcing thing, right? So there's weekends, there's nights, there's a lot of that stuff. It gets better with time and the financial rewards are quite good, but it's a little bit of a dog-eat-dog world. That brings me to a second point, culture. And Carla talked about this and it resonates through everything we say. I am an incredibly proud employee of Morgan Stanley. There are different firms that you need to diligence that will either reflect your value systems more or less. And that's important. And then we talk about culture, but it's a real thing. So if you're interested in the financial services industry, make sure it's a firm that represents your values, your ethos. I know Morgan Stanley, when I talk to our young vets, and we have a lot of programs that not just for mentoring, but get-togethers, if you will. You need to be able to look in the mirror. And this would be simpatico with what my fellow panelists said, say, I really like what I do. I'm really proud of what I do. I feel like I can give back. I can not only make money and do well for my family, but also represent the value system that I hold so dear. So it might sound a little strange coming from a Wall Street guy, but believe me, there's a right way to do things, and there's not a right way to do things. And I know everybody on the phone here joined the military, who's serving the nation, has a strong belief in their value system. And so that's what I got. Thank you for your time. If I can be helpful to anybody, I am on LinkedIn too. I talk to veterans all day long. I mean, we also do, and I saw Carla on your slide mention hiring our heroes. I was talking to, it's not just JO's getting out. I was talking to a 20-year Army veteran, Apache helicopter pilot. He's 20 years. He just retired. He's retiring. And he's in the Hiring Our Heroes program, which is one of the things the DOD does with Chamber of Commerce to help people get a 3-month, look at different businesses. I also think about that. That's a really good program. Again, none of these existed, but they exist now. And he came in after his 3 months and he's thinking of pivoting a little bit, but he had a 3-month opportunity to work in industry. So just to call out for that program as well. Well, Bob, thank you very much for giving me some time here. I appreciate it. And best of luck to everybody out there.
No, thank you, Joe. And if people want to hear more about Joe's transition, we did an interview with him, I think it was last year, and was in the Oakleaf, which has a lot more information. But Teresa, if you can go to the next slide. So there actually is a question that one of the individuals on the webinar is asking. Now I'm just going to open it up to all the panelists that are still online. And the question is there any difference on transitioning as a junior or mid-grade officer versus a senior officer? Do you have any advice when discussing employment opportunities when it comes to age or experience? I'll just kind of open it up to everybody.
Well, I'll probably jump on that since I actually did experience that. I would say the difference for me was I didn't have the fallback of knowing I had an income or at least a pension. But when I left at my 9-year point, I went through the junior officer or JO headhunter firm and actually used a couple different firms to work to find the right job that I wanted. But I think The process really, though, is the same. You need to prepare. You need to figure out what you want to do, get your resumes and your documents and your mindset down, and make it your job. And that goes for whether you're a retiree or a separating earlier in your career. But to me, it became, I guess, my job. And I really kind of enjoyed it. And if you go to these headhunter, if any of you have separated on here and go to these JO hiring conferences, I was at a hotel in Atlanta in 1999. I remember the headhunter gave me a list of rooms to go to at certain times, and I would knock, and you turn it on and start the interviewing process. And and I had offers from GE and some other companies. I ended up going to supply chain management in another company in Ohio. But I don't think it's different from that perspective. I think part of it, though, when you're a retiree, you're also a little bit older. There's a lot more considerations you got to take into account. I think many panelists noted that between family and older, and maybe parents too, but kids and spouses and their careers. Probably as a JO, maybe less of that applies, but in many ways, it's very similar, other than not having that financial fallback already.
This is Eddie. I'd like to just add, I would say, regardless of whether you are transitioning as a JO or as a senior officer, and I've seen it both because I said I had kids that did it, the key is, I believe, you should highlight your leadership experience. That's what military officers have that a lot of people don't have. They have leadership skills. And a lot of times, I believe that the hiring officials, HR people, don't really understand what we do. And I like to explain that all military people are good problem solvers, and whether you were a junior enlisted person who had responsibility for a small number of people, or a senior officer who had a lot of responsibility for people, highlight your people skills and your leadership skills, because that's something that I think is severely lacking in a lot of organizations. And we bring that to the table, and everyone should have confidence in that aspect of what they do. It's my 2 cents.
And I would offer to simply make sure that, regardless if you're JO or a senior officer, to seek that support out and make sure that you can translate your tangible skills from your time in the service to what the civilian counterpart is. And there's tools out there and resources that can assist with that translation, because a lot of times, folks don't understand what PB for T is. But it enables, it speaks to organization, it speaks to planning, it speaks to, a whole bunch of things. So even something like PB for T can be translated and, to your favor. So, and one other thing, don't discount anything that you have done. A lot of times we want to we want to give ourselves less credit. And whereas going to the civilian sector, it is about the I sometimes instead of the we. So go forward in confidence, knowing that you have contributed to a team and to a team success, and make sure you highlight that and advocate for yourself.
I just want to add one quick story, because Eddie kind of triggered this. I remember interviewing with a banking company, and they were specifically asking about how much, the money that I had. And being on a cruiser, a small boy, I didn't have that much dollar figure, but we handle a lot more. I go, yes, but I was also being a helicopter control officer, damage control. I had the con underway, and you're doing all that and managing people's lives 24 hours a day. Everybody out there, retiree or JO, it doesn't matter. You've got tremendous amount of time management ability that puts you head and shoulders above any civilian out there. So definitely sell yourself on that.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you very much. One thing I wanted to add before I transition out from this segment is that for anybody who is thinking about transitioning out of the military, I would get a copy of this military transition book. It's called Out of Uniform. It's by an author, Tom Wolfe. I did an interview with him probably about a year and a half ago. And it's an excellent guide to how do you do your career transition. It has a lot of different tips and tools and introspection that you should go through before you really start putting your plan together. Like I said, it's a great book. It's a great read. And I think it's a must-have for people who are going to be doing this transition process. I'd just like to thank all of our panelists for this great webinar. I think people have gotten a lot of things out of it. Hopefully it would give them a little bit more direction, some tools that they can use to start thinking about their transition process. Tracy, if you can go on to the next slide, and I can go ahead and start to wrap this up. One of the missions of the Navy Supply Corps Foundation is to provide the information and resources necessary to allow for a smooth transition from military to civilian life. We accomplished some of this by revamping the transition page on the foundation webpage a few years ago. The foundation wanted to provide Supply Corps office members a one-stop shop to create and execute a successful plan in finding the right post-military career. The objective was to go beyond just providing job announcements and job fairs, but providing information and website resources that would allow you to formulate a transition plan, develop marketing material, establish networks, create resumes, and develop interviewing techniques. One of these services being offered by the foundation is the Professional Certification and License Grant Program. The grants provide up to $500 to assist with the cost of attaining a certification or license to enhance your civilian career opportunities. To be considered for this grant, the transition site has an online application that once received, it will be reviewed and then send a notification for reimbursement determination. Another resource is the business card program. This program pays for initial set of business cards for Supply Corps officers who are just starting that transitioning out of the military service. There are additional information and resources available on the transition website. I encourage everybody to go to it. We are constantly updating it with new content and features to assist in a smooth transition to civilian life on the Foundation's webpage and also on their Facebook page. I hope that you enjoyed our first transition webinar. If there is any other topics that you'd like to see us tackle for another transition webinar, go ahead and send me your ideas to transition at usnfscf.com. Over to you, Dan.
All right, thanks, Bob. Next slide, Teresa. So this concludes our webinar for this evening. We'll be sending a recording of the webinar and slides the next day or two. I wanted to give a special thanks, like Bob had said as well, to our distinguished panel for their dedication, commitment, time to participate in tonight's webinar. Really was superb, I thought. A lot of good background diversity, and people came from different aspects from the transition. There were a lot of questions that came up, and we're going to get answers back. I'll feed all the questions to the panelists, and we'll get those back to everybody as well. But thanks to our panelists, Eddie, Carla, Joe, Scott, and Richard, and then Bob. Thank you for moderating. Really a great job. So we plan on doing, and I also want to thank the staff, the foundation staff, put a lot of hard work in making this webinar possible. Like Bob said, we plan to do additional transition webinars in the near future. We had a lot of interest in this one, on both sides. A lot of people, folks think about transitioning, but also a lot of folks who had transitioned said, "Hey, I can also help with this and provide my experience." So more to follow on that. We plan on doing 2 or 3 days a year. This is an ongoing thing. It's not a one or done a program or service. So stay tuned, and we'll let you know the next one is planned. And again, you should see the recording and the slides the next day or two. If you like what the foundation is doing and enjoy tonight's webinar, again, Please help support our mission programs by making donation to the foundation. Every dollar helps, I can tell you that. It supports our mission. Use the QR code on the next slide and visit us at www.usnfc.com. And also follow us on social media and really, especially LinkedIn. Connect with us on LinkedIn. You're going to find out that's a great platform for, especially for careers. I think you'll find a lot of good benefit of that. And then lastly, thank you for attending, and look forward to seeing everyone at a foundation event in the near future or our next webinar. So with that, good night and stay safe.
Good night. Thank you.